Hi, folks. It is Aunty K or Krista Flute, and we are here today with another Oracles of Colonization, where we use one of the cards from the Oracle of Colonization, which is part of the Land Back Tarot, and the major it corresponds to. And we talk about those issues through tarot. I'm going to be joined today by Nialah, and her social media links are going to be in the description box for this YouTube video. And today we're going to talk about to privilege and to the high priestess or the healer. And we're probably going to touch on, you know, the high priestess's links to the Hierophant, and so also the emperor and various things in between. And okay, so hi Nialah, I see that you're coming in. I am going to have you introduce yourself while I go behind the curtain and kill a spider.
No worries.
So can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Nialah. I also go by Priscilla. I am a tarot reader and book. I've been a tarot reader for about 5 years now. And a lot of my tarot inspiration comes from the amazing friends in my circles and the books I get to read and the videos I get to watch.
Thank you so much. I am Krista Flute. I'm a liquidating Cajun scoop survivor. I'm a tarot reader. I've recently made the Land Back Tarot. I've been reading tarot for 13 years, primarily in my community before starting to read outside of my community. And I've often thought about, you know, how my understandings and worldview are translated through tarot. And so this is how we are getting to these conversations. And so, like I said, we are going to talk about the high priestess or the healer and to privilege today. Yes, we haven't found it. I know. There is apparently a very large spider in the toy bucket. So, you know, it's tragic. So for privilege, it says, privilege is so centered on their own needs as human goddess, that the consideration that also should not serve them first is seen as insult and threat alike. Privilege chooses blindness where it serves them, serve others. And for the high priestess, so for the high priestess, I wrote, when your soul needs healing, reach for your inner feminine healer. You'll find that feminine healing power under the full moon upon the earth in front of waters, comforted by a sense of safety. Let these beings guide you to heal the traumas of colonialism and oppression 7 generations forward and 7 generations past. And in reverse, be aware of your surroundings, know the difference between truth and lies. And so we were talking about, you know, the ties that that we've been taught in this society, under capitalist colonial society, that oh man, I'm having a brain fart.
Nice. Are you talking about the high priestess connection with the higher
With privilege.
Oh, with privilege.
Yeah. So do you want to start off a conversation there on that?
Yeah. I think we were also talking about yeah, the one I really want to talk about is the idea of hierarchy and how we do place healers and our, our readers or intuitive people on this, in this weird hierarchy that we are supposed to look up to them, as opposed to they're supposed to see kind of eye to eye, or at least they're here to guide you, which is what I always thought the Hierophant was supposed to be, was a guide, somebody who's supposed to help you, give you the information, and it's up, they kind of empower, they give you like the truth and empower you, and then you make your choices. I thought that's how it's supposed to be. But in the way that we see healers is that, oh, they're up here and we're down here, and we have, like, they're kind of out of bounds. Like, you can't just sit there and have a normal conversation with them, which is completely backwards, in that the way even in the way we work in our culture, it's, those are people they're just everyday people. It's just when they're needed, they take on this role. But even within that role, they're still the same people that you see tomorrow, who are just living their life at the same time.
And they might have a talent that seems so unreachable for you, but like, your talents might also seem very unreachable for them.
Exactly. It reminds me of the Chariot. I know one else is talking about other cards, but in the Chariot in the Sweeney Todd is all about, like, what you see as weakness could be a strength, and what other people see as a strength could be a weakness. It's just the idea that all our talents, all our hidden powers are ours, are our own, but that doesn't invalid, like, just because one person's been trained for 10 years or 16 years or whatever, 20 years, does not mean that you can't start the journey, that you can't get there. It's all about time and effort and energy. And people, I think in many ways it absolves people of their own power. They kind of take away their own power, but by not realizing that this is a journey that you can do too. This is completely attainable for you as well. This is not some type of hierarchy that you can't reach. This is not a God. Like, it might be a divinely blessed, gift, but that doesn't mean that you aren't also divinely blessed as well in your own way. And, I feel like it can rob yourself. And in many ways you absolve yourself of any type of, desire to start the path.
Yeah. And when we put it in a place of hierarchy, we also put it in this idea that you have to be exceptional at it, to do it, right? And like, if I think of, like, say, hunting, you don't have to be like the best hunter to provide for your family. And it's still something you aim and achieve for, even if, like, you're going to plateau out at average, like, that's not a failure on you, right? Like, not everybody has to excel at everything for their role in that to be, like, important. And we lose those people who don't realize the gifts they have, because they haven't reached the point where we can put them on a pedestal.
Yeah, it reminds me of if we're talking about who we bestow privilege on and who we don't give it to, and that by putting them on the pedestal, and by kind of giving them this type of aura of unattainable and God gifted and this and that. Hold on, I think I just lost the train of thought. It becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that we give them all these tools, we give them all these opportunities, we give them everything that they need to be successful. Meanwhile, the people who kind of are, who kind of see this, feel like they can't, ever attain it.
I'm sorry, hang on a second. Hanu, I can't ask you to, like, do some of that again.
No, that's all good.
Yeah.
What was I saying? Right, I was saying it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that because these people are heralded as the greatest, the God-gifted, this and that, and a pedestal by everybody, we kind of give them also the means and the ways to also continue to be better at what they're doing, and we, pool all our resources and our time and our, even a constant, if we're thinking about attention and effort as currency, they get all the currency of our attention, our time. And then it kind of discourages a lot of people below, or people who who are just starting out. It reminds me of activists a lot too, where like in activist circles, sometimes the mainstream like world will put one activist as the activist. And by doing so, and by doing so, it's like they get, their voice gets heard, which is great, but it's like the other voices and other people who need to also be heard, who also have, either other backgrounds or other powers or ideas or concepts or revolutionary ideas, don't get that the mic passed along because this one person has been given all of it. And that's what we talk about when we talk about privilege.
And in really similar ways, that privilege then gets used. Like there's plenty of times where we don't see activists or spiritual folks pass on that privilege, like, and they don't pass it on, and they don't pass on those teachings. I talked once about, I've been part of a sweat lodge family for a really, really long time. And that sweat lodge leader didn't pass those skills on to anyone, not his kids, not anyone else in the sweat lodge family. And so without him, there was no one else to do that who was trained. And that is that's an act of privilege, to think that like you have something that you should decide who you should and shouldn't bestow it on, versus like sharing those abilities with as many people as possible.
And that's why I like your idea of the Two of Cups, in that it's two people joining together and drinking from the same milkshake or boba tea. I think it's boba tea together.
Strawberry drink. Very popular at powwows.
It's like the idea that we all share from the same cup, and we should be sharing from the same cup. And you're right, it is 100% a privilege to have that knowledge, especially in a world, in our world right now, where to get that knowledge, you have to have money, you need time, you need downtime, you need all this stuff to be able to do all these things. So it's such a disservice if you don't pass it.
But those are things, like there's ways we can make them more accessible. I don't have to think back very far, like in my adult years, to know when Indigenous community didn't require money to go see an elder or bring an elder in. It was something the whole community pitched in and did. You also didn't have to put them up in a hotel room. You put them up in somebody's like house, someone who has a spare room. And the community made sure that person's fridge was full. And so access wasn't a privilege, and they were treated as regular human beings. And I think I saw more teachings passed on in that time than in this time, where they tend to be tied to academia and need to be put up in hotels.
And I think it comes a lot to do with, of course, capitalism, because unfortunately we need money to live. We need money to this. Like money is literally the currency that we need to do anything. It feels like anything, even though that's not necessarily true. It feels like that. And even for me, when I think about my practices, I don't like to do something if there's not much money involved, because I need to live. And I have things I have to get. I have people I have to provide for. I have this and that. But there are times where there's no money involved. That is where I do give so freely, because it's like it's almost like I'm called to just let it all out, to talk, have conversations. And that's usually where I get the best inspiration, best conversations, from those moments of, true, freedom, like the exchange of ideas, the exchange of, energy and time. But it's always that trying to balance the two of like, I need money. When we're calling somebody from outside, we need to have money. Even asking, elders, like the Big Ma elders here, to come to our, organizing event. It's almost like we need to give them something. We need to give them money. We need to give them this, because it's like they, especially as marginalized people, we especially need that money, especially. So it's such a hard situation to be in. It's so hard to be in.
A lot of people I've been taught by in the past would say, you know, your community like looks after your needs. And so if you're doing work or readings in your community, like you can accept money or food or supplies or whatever, right? And you know, when you work outside your community, you charge money, and especially for like marginalized people, because all of us at one time were not allowed to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I talked about this on one of my other videos, like you know, white people could divine and do the jobs that we did, but you know, people of color weren't. You know, there's other ways to criminalize, and now we see it in you know, some of the methods in our backgrounds, like the more obvious ones being like looking for curses and stuff. You know, they like to say, if a reader tells you you're cursed, they're a fake. But for a lot of our practices, like that is absolutely culturally what our people are coming to ask us.
Mm-hmm. Also, it's funny to speak about that, how like when witches or when white people are looking for curses and curse people who can curse, or people who can lift curses, who they turn to. You know, they love to kind of throw cursing and evil, you know, evil magic on the side, but when it comes to doing real shit,
Yeah.
when they really need that power, who do they come to?
We're fakes if we tell you about the curse, but we're real when they want to curse.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's exactly it. And even that, like, cursing is so common in our culture. Like, it's complete, because it's like cursing could be as simple as I give you a dirty look because you did something to me, and that I kind of cursed you with something there. Like either, you know, or your ancestors are using me as a way to teach you, you know, your generation or your whoever a lesson about the ways that your group has been operating for a while. You know, it's so fundamental and so like natural in the ways that we do magic. But again, for white people, that's the privilege of white people too. They don't have to. I also the way I see the way white
Their
people are,
privilege protects them
that's, I was
from
going to say, they're
many of the
protected.
effects.
Yes.
Many of the effects of curses. It protects them.
Yeah, they're protected.
You can stop their money flow, and they have family and generations to buffer that back up. And you can take their job from them, but their minister is going to find them a new job.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me a lot about the way that, like, when we talk about like the church and the magic of the church, because the Bible is a very heavily magic item. And when we think about like that, the ways that they have been able to do their magic for so long while ours were demonized, of course they like, if we're thinking about the pie, the stake of, you know, who has more of the pie right now, the white, you know, the white ancestors, their white, you know, the white institutions, the white church, their magic is
I've
so
talked
much
about
stronger.
this before. The early years of the Roman Catholic Church up until like the 1400s, a lot of occult knowledge comes from them pilfering like other cultures and their spiritualities, because they were a brand new spirituality. They didn't have any magic. They went pilfering for like all this occult knowledge, which was protected during the witch hunt years and remained in the upper classes until the 1800s, when upper class people brought that in as like magic and witchcraft. But yeah, the church is like so tied to so much of that, and the privilege that a lot of that type of magic requires. They had a heavy hand in it. They always, churches and their emperors turned to those knowledges of the people. They would then turn around and colonize eventually. And you know, to control those knowledges and to control those magics,
to suppress it too, because in our magic is the oldest magic that's been here. It is the magic of the earth, which is consistent. I mean, as long as we don't destroy it, but it's consistent. That earth magic is so strong. This world's magic is very much tied to, all indigenous people on this earth. Like that is where that was birthed. So they had to colonize. They had to, because if they didn't, then they wouldn't have any power. Because you're right, they had no magic. Like they steal our stuff. They take practices from, and that's why I hate modern day spirituality, because you can see the pilfered, you can see the disjointed, you can see the literally stitched together magic that they've done. Literally, it's in many ways. If I didn't hate it, I'd be impressed with the way that they've been able to just suppress everything and then steal and then put together this weird makeshift like quilt of magic that they use.
Yeah.
On us, really on us. Because they're protected. The church is such a strong hitter. That's why like the idea of colonizing through the church, through religion, is so powerful. And that's usually why that's the first thing they do. They go with the church, because that's magic. That is how they truly do the spell, where they kind of take over a land. You do go with the church with the magic, and then you come later.
You were talking about someone who was talking about how it's like we've had a spell cast over us through colonization that makes us forget that, white supremacy and colonization and patriarchy at one point didn't exist. And it wasn't that it was thousands of years ago, but it was actually like created in the 1400s and, then turned into church doctrine, those spells by those magicians, turned into spells, into words, into legally binding words that would rule this planet. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And like because even when you think about that time where the occult was so big, secret societies were huge in like white circles. Like literally it's ridiculous when you see just how entrenched our modern day concept of society comes from those ideas, and their ideas of magic and their collections, to the point now where like you can't find anything of the past in terms of magic without running into their circles, which is, again, when we talk about decolonizing, it's like how do we move past their ideas of magic, because our ideas of magic might be a little similar because they did take from us, but it's not the same, and it works differently. And trying to use their ways and their methods to do our magic, you can get a little bit like far, but not you're going to reach the wall very quickly, because that's really not how things are supposed to be done.
Because it was redesigned to uphold privilege. It was redesigned to uphold privilege in our mind, in our spiritualities. Yeah.
And it's even the idea of decolonizing, because after I've been in a couple of activist circles, and even thinking, kind of rethinking the way I've been taught. Well, I guess when the spell was broken for me, even doing tarot was always such a, how do I do this properly? How do I do it in a way that's right for me? That's clear of the spell. How do I kind of clean it up so it's not cleaned up, but how do I purify away from that idea? And I'm still struggling with that, because it's like things.
Yeah, it's hugely part of this spell. It hugely is, right down to, we invented it in the 1400s. It's like from Africa to China, there was cards that you call playing cards. From Africa to China, but like but yeah, you invented it. And they want to argue about who the ideas really came from. Probably effing everybody.
Yeah.
Their ideas of the cult came from everybody. But it is a really, really, oh wow. It is a really, really clean, like a roster.
Like these concepts and ideas have been existent since I wouldn't be surprised if we had the means to, I wouldn't be surprised if in the future, like every part of the globe. This is not their magic. Like you said, I don't think they even have, I guess if I were to be petty, I'd say their magic is definitely the magic effect. Like that is how they excel at thievery and taking it and then turning it into magic and then turning that into privilege, which is talent. I will say that is talent to be able to do that so well. But yeah, this is not their magic. And you can tell because every time when even when I'm looking for spiritual practices, when I'm looking for healers, when I'm looking for somebody to help me with my spiritual journey, I do not turn to white people. And that's because you can tell that it's like a fakery. There's like a, they might have magic, but I would much rather find that from an actual, for me, it'd be like a Black or African spiritual teacher who can actually speak with my ancestors, who know the proper channels to be able to speak to them with me. Not that I can't find it elsewhere, but I go with who I know has almost a closer link to me and to my ancestors, to my power. Always.
And if anything, one of the worries is mistranslation, right?
Mm-hmm. And
one of the worries is mistranslation, and it is really dangerous. And like, if looking at my deck, like where I've made changes to translate like Eurocentric idea into an idea where it's taken out like some of those concepts or shown that it's fully made of those concepts, like, so our words are going to get mistranslated, like I have righteous rage as a shadow to the lovers. They might mistranslate that to like the 5 of Wands or the 7 of Swords and like warn you away from it. They might not see it as, they wouldn't see it as truth. But there's so many ways where like, yeah, these mistranslations can be really difficult for us. I've had readings from white people 3 times that were like cold readings. They didn't like know me or anything. And in all 3 cases, they started with like, whoa, this is really heavy energy. And but because it's what me and my ancestors are carrying is beyond what they're used to working with
and what they can handle. And that's again, talk about privilege. It is a privilege to not have to have heavy energy like that. Or I shouldn't say it's a privilege. It's a privilege to not have to deal with hard energy all the time. Us as marginalized people, BIPOC people, it's the consequences of what happens with us is a lot more deeper, much more intense than what happens to white people. Yeah. And that's where the privilege comes in. We talk about ancestral trauma. Even though white people carry ancestral trauma, our ancestral trauma to this day impacts the way we interact with each other in our own cultural groups. It is so insidious. It's so hard. We're dealing with some things that go back, since the dawn of colonization. They don't have to deal with that. They just deal with the privilege that comes with it, right? And that makes it easy. And you're right. Like a lot of readers, I hate when they're like, "Oh, you can tell it's a shallow reading. It's so shallow," and it doesn't, because what is the word I'm thinking of? They don't have the capacity. They just don't have the range. They don't have the range to be able to dive in deep. Like, let's talk about the ancestral trauma, of your group of people who have had to deal with X, Y, and Z for this long, and how this manifests in your life. Like the lovers can be much more complex than just, oh, you have a soulmate, or you have a twin flame.
I don't know if I could listen to a European descent person want to give me advice from my colonial traumas. I don't think I could.
That's so inappropriate. It's so inappropriate.
Yeah. There's this difficulty. They might come up with the 10 of Wands and like, we can't put it down. We have the 10 of Wands because we're these people on this like wheel. But we still have to live life like with that like burden on us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Du Bois, who's a really popular Black American scholar, talks a lot about like this dual consciousness that we kind of live in as Black people, like the idea that we have to live in 2 different worlds. Same thing in spirituality. It's like you can see the 2 worlds of white practitioners versus non-white practitioners, and it's like we have to kind of be able to see their privilege and have to kind of bypass it all the time to get to the truth, because they also, with the idea of privilege and how they kind of gatekeep, they do gatekeep certain ideas and concepts and where they get some of their knowledge. A lot of times it comes from Indigenous people, it comes from Black people, it comes from these, actual practitioners, but the way that they kind of obscure where they get their ideas from, who they get, because you're right, when you're talking about how we are, where we are in this world, who we are in this world impacts directly into how we do our spiritual practice. They're coming with their privilege, they're coming with their whiteness, they're coming with colonization, they're coming with genocide, they're coming with all these ideas and concepts that back how they do readings. And it's just so inappropriate when they try an attempt to tap into that or translate it. It's in my eyes, it's always going to be mistranslated, and I'd rather just not waste my time. Yeah.
But and then that also goes on us, like, when we went there. Yeah, like.
Yeah, and but to this day I'm still trying to unlearn the way. That's why the Sweeney Todd deck, that's why I'm so grateful that was my first deck, because I wanted to go the traditional, like, writer way, whatever, like that typical, oh, you have to start here and this is how you do tarot. But this deck does not follow the same concepts, the traditional concepts of tarot, and I'm pretty sure this is not a white person who made this deck. So it's like it kind of freed my mind really early on about how to interpret things, and how, like, just because the emperor is this way and these ideas and these colors are here, again, this restriction of tarot is found in the deck, in the traditional deck. This deck completely changed that for me. It told me, hey, this is not standard, and it doesn't have to be standard. Your intuition is just as strong as the idea of symbolism that white people use in their decks.
Yeah, I have rarely had a traditional deck. I've had decks that were based on Rider-Waite systems. And despite what people say, I learned with cards that would be considered like that intermediate, like it's based on it, but it's going to be hard to see it. I still learned that way, and, got to see various images along the way. But, I was already talking, in community and outside of community about, seeing and recognizing colonialism and white supremacy. And so I probably not having RWS clones helped me be like, I can read this how I want to read it.
Yeah. And it's so, I don't know, but that spell is so insidious. Like, it's so, especially sometimes when I catch myself doing readings that are just so shallow, and I'm like, where is this coming from? Like, where am I grounding this from? Am I grounding this from what I've seen and heard from, like, the traditional way of tarot, or is this actually coming from where I'm coming from? And yeah, that's actually why I took a step back from doing tarot readings, because I really had to reassess how I was looking at my decks, and what decks call to me and what decks don't, and really being, strict with even the deck energy I welcome, because these decks are made by a lot of different people. And there's some like, for example, this deck, I forgot what it's called, but it's like this very intuitive, it's a very basic, like very popular deck. There's no magic in this. Yeah, for me, there's no magic in it. Not
the first person I've heard say that.
Yeah, like I can't, I don't get anything from this. Every time I pull a deck, I'm just like, I don't, it just doesn't speak with me. It won't speak with me. But, the Crow Tarot or the Sweeney Todd, I'm like, oh yeah, these, let's go. Like, this is go time. Like, I know what I'm doing. I get it. I'm in tune. Yeah. It's just, we got to go ahead.
I've gotten more and more intentional. I've moved from, like, I'm going to find, what I dislike the least, to I'm going to keep finding decks that I like. And so, yeah, I have a number that I like. Obviously, I had my deck, which, is based on Rider-Waite, but, like, veers off.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And these are the decks that I'm using. I have decks packed away. I pack away and pass on decks more than I keep them, I'll be honest. I have Mari in the Skies Gentle Tarot. And so this is by an Indigenous artist. Wow. And it's, got all Indigenous people or animals. And I've always struggled with animal decks. So I'm working on this so I can, like, dive into animal decks more. Because I have 2 on my list that I want to, feel good about before I get them. I have Kaleidodope, which is like where this Hierophant and Emperor and High Priestess come from.
I love that. That's just a beautiful deck.
Yeah,
I have a couple.
I'm working on getting to know Mystic Garbage, which I like. The people are outlines that are either uncolored or colored in rainbows. Kind of neat. And the only mass market one that I'm still using and haven't passed on is the Muse Tarot.
The Muse Tarot. I don't think I've seen that. Oh yeah, that's the name. Just wow. Oh.
Yeah, it's a pretty great deck.
Yeah, there's 2 decks on my list and they're just so expensive, and I appreciate that it's expensive because these are the decks I want are made by actual, like the ones I want are like African spiritual, like these are real spiritual people, and I will give them whatever amount they ask, because this is, that's when we talk about intentional real magic. I'll pay what's necessary, that even though I hate that we have to do it that way, but it's a nod towards the reality of the world. You have to kind of play with
finally recognize I spend less money paying for the indie deck that has what I want in it, and I'm putting money into someone's hands that I want to put money into,
exactly,
and has like more than 30% diversity, like and I end up wasting less money actually, because those other decks that I bought because I could buy a deck right now, like they rarely make it to the 6-month mark.
Yeah, we'll probably just discard it. Yeah, or given away. Yeah.
Maybe we aren't supposed to connect to their magic.
I think
anymore.
That's true. And even with the fact that you've even created a deck, the person I was talking to about that talks about the idea of the spell. Her name is Priestess Amatran. I forgot. I'll send it to you if you want to know about her. But she does a lot of occult things, whatever. But she talks about how in the Age of Aquarius, it's time for people to create their own decks. It's time to kind of get away from mass producing, intentional creating, innovating the idea of how a deck works and what kind of magic a deck has, which is why I was so happy to hear that you're making land back tarot. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is exactly what is needed. We've
always been divining. Many of you have been doing it with cards forever. Like, we should remake them.
Literally, yeah, we really should remake them. You make them and just completely innovative, because we're honestly, in my eyes, we're doomed if we don't. Like, and I don't just mean us, I mean also white society. They're doomed if they do not listen. They're doomed if they don't consult. They're doomed if they don't allow this reimagining of a new future from our eyes, not theirs. They're doomed. And it's, so this is supposed to happen. And any attempt of trying to stop this energy and stop this innovation, and even when I heard that people had taken away some of their donations from like, that is a direct act of violence, because this is necessary. And to take away from that because of something that you nitpicked because you didn't like is so violent. Like, how that's, again, it's working against the future. It's working against innovation. It's working against this new world that we're trying to all literally grab everybody, by their chests to come forward, because this has to be the future. This has to be the way we do things. We cannot do anything else.
Too. Well, I mean, they won't all sink. They will build Earthships or something, but and wreak more havoc on us if we don't stop it. But it wouldn't really be a life they'd want compared to this even. But and they are impacted too, and they are impacted by this spell too. And we were talking about it earlier, like, as colonialism and slavery are being birthed, so were the idea of witches and the devil and witchcraft and it needing to be sanctified. I'm not saying Europe didn't have magic, they did, but this idea of classifying them as a unit to attack was being birthed through the same time period. And that spell was cast on them too. This idea that, patriarchy and having to get married and having to have children and, having to not go to work and not being able to collect herbs and do midwifery and other things. They were part of that too. Mm-hmm. And then, when we talked about it, I said, like, they accepted this role, they accepted this contract that, they weren't ever going to be equals, but they could be in second place. Mm-hmm. And so we see like the high priestess gets to, we give her some sort of privilege, but it's really only recognized from those below her. And, and she's separated from the Hierophant, from her counterpart. She's not side by side like the emperor and the empress. Her status is demoted. But, she accepts when she accepts that privilege to stay on that ladder. Mm-hmm. And that's part of it. We see that acceptance of privilege and that loss of real magic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when we think, just speaking about the idea of them, when they accepted it, they did get demoted. Like midwifery was big in Europe; it was huge. That's where a lot of women had a lot of power. They could kind of help and enable and do their natural magic. Like even thinking about what is it called? I forgot what the idea of magic in Ireland is. But even the magic that comes from that land, the English took over and completely colonized most of that and stripped them from their magic, before they entered the contract. It took them a lot longer than other people to enter the contract, but they did eventually enter the contract. And because of that, where their magic has been what's the word? Not dulled down, but diluted. And that it takes more effort, more energy, more this to make the same amounts of the same effect as it used to be in the past. But again, it's also a form of protection because things like spells, things like fairies, things like all their old ideas of magic can't affect them as much as they used to. The idea of the dying gods, if you don't believe in their gods, they lose their power. It kind of feels the same way. It's a form of protection, but it's a cage, right? It's a wall to keep things out, but it's also a cage at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. And I wonder if, again, how much when we think about when people want to see their privilege, when the spell is also dissolved for them as well, that does mean that what was locked out can come in. And I'm very interested to see what kind of world that will be when things are finally seen for the truth that they are. Their privilege can't protect them anymore. So I think about like the racking up of karma, the racking up of like even ancestral, not payback, but there is something. There's a balance that there does have to be in this world, and it feels like they've been protecting themselves with this privilege from actually, getting the repercussions of their work on this earth, which is very, very, in many ways, very evil, very insidious, very, very terrible. Once that's gone, they will feel the actual implications and the actual repercussions. And I think that's also why a lot of them are afraid. They think it's going to come from us physically, which it may from some of us. Yeah, but
they
it's
do.
also
They're
spiritual.
afraid that, what they have done to us, we will do to them. But the actuality is, what they have gained from us, they will lose if they give up privilege. And the only way out of this is giving up privilege.
Mhm.
And, like, giving up privilege sucks. But yeah, it has to happen. You have to give up privilege to like move beyond what we have now to the unknown.
Mhm. And ideas of boundaries, we see entitlement a lot from white people, especially in our circles. Entitlement of knowledge, of information, and especially when the rise of pushback against what is the word? Not colonization, appropriation. When that was a big thing, it's still a big thing, but when it was really starting off, there was a lot of pushback because they were so entitled to that information, so entitled to our time, so entitled to this. And then we're like, hey, no, we're claiming our time. This is, if you want access to this, you have to do this and this. Now it's, it's much more strict for you, and we'll make it easier for ourselves, but for you, you have to pay extra. The big pushback against that is happening right now. They have to respect our boundaries now. They no longer have that spell to protect them. A lot of us see the truth for what it is, are not allowing that spell to continue on, which is boundaries for us.
Yeah, protection magic.
Yeah, which I have to get into. I have to really start protecting energy more.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And we need it, because when we see the power of that spell and the power of how we've been like hoodwinked by capitalist colonialism to believe that this is how things are, and always have been. And oh man, I blanked on where I was going.
I'm not sure. We're talking about hoodwink.
Yeah, start us off on a different something.
It's all good. Well, I guess just to go back to what you're saying about the, now that we're on this, we're no longer hoodwink, we're no longer being, we're no longer believing the lies. In many ways, the world is opened up. And when I was talking about how when we don't believe in our gods, they lose their power. We don't believe in our, spirituality. They lose this power. Now that we're starting to really get back into it and believe in it again, our power is growing. Collectively, our power is growing. So now we can actually stand up to these institutions. Now we can demand justice properly. Our rage in our cultures is power. There's power in being angry, and injustice should be calling. Injustice makes us angry. That's power. We are getting our power back. And they're afraid of that. But it's also, you can't stop it. You cannot stop it. It's too late. It's the stone has started rolling down the hill, and I know that's the consequences. The lies are, being addressed.
Yeah, it is. And then we see like our need for that protection, because we see what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're scared of. It's like we were talking, was it earlier in this conversation before we started? When we identify a curse, we're fake.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't want us seeing the truth of how, our lives have been messed with, or we've been hoodwinked, or we've been cursed, or our spell's been cast on us.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want us to see the truth of this. But when they want one done, we're the real deal.
Yeah, we're the real deal then. Yeah. And even the spell, and even speaking about our own communities, my idea of even witchcraft and tarot, they're seen as such terrible. And this is the thing I hate. I despise about the idea of white privilege and white people in the spiritual practices. They have the freedom to operate and to be as they are. And they also have the privilege to kind of just, like, when we see this movement now with going back to the homestead and having your own, being self-sustainable, they can do that. They are allowed to do that. And in many ways, they
have always been allowed to be pioneers.
Exactly.
And
which
settlers.
It's so unfair.
Pioneer romanticism is so unfair. It's so gross. It enrages me so much. you know, as someone who's looking at like, how can we get like people out of, you know, world indigenous people out of the cities to like live like with the earth as our all of our teachings teach us to do. Like, you know, have you seen this group doing this pioneer adventure? And yeah, you know, they're like, you can't, you know, be anti-racist and want to recreate the pioneer era for yourself. Like, and also like those styles of homes, are so heavy. They are not like, they are resource heavy. European style homes, you know, are resource heavy. They need too much to heat. They need too much to cool. Um, all of it. But you know, you can build a small, tiny home, but you know, you want to build something that's not European design, then you have even further ideas and issues. And it's a really like, the pioneers were not environmentally friendly folks. They clear cut the land to put up a select few crops, you know, and yeah, clear cut their forests for their jobs to do so, to heat their resource heavy homes. Like,
yeah. And like, it's so like, even thinking about that, like, if you were to come to Earth now as an outsider and you were to see what people are doing, we would be considered the ones that are unsustainable. We would be considered the ones that are bad, that are doing the, when, you know, it's because of their privilege that they're allowed to move in these spaces and leave. They're the ones that are flocking to the, you know, to the outskirts of towns, because that's where like it's much more healthy. But they're the ones doing all this, and they're heralders.
And they
too,
are
like
right now. They're flocking en masse from the cities to places like where I live because of COVID. And this exactly happened in the Black Plague too, as feudalism is falling, as we touched on earlier. You know, the peasant class was forced to stay in the cities while the rich fled the cities to get away from the plague, and their servants went with them. And the merchants and peasant classes had to stay in the cities and were locked within them to keep commerce going. Like,
to sustain them outside.
The tithe is like to today is so astronomical. It's not funny. And then, you know, they were like, fuck this, we're not going to work for you. You're not going to underpay us anymore. We're, you know, going to find ways out of the city. We're going to return to the commons you're closing. That it largely took the peasant class, because the merchant class was afraid to give up their privilege.
Which is, yeah, you're right. It's so, you can see that so much right now in the way that even like it's when they say history is cyclical, it is cyclical, but it's only cyclical because people don't want to give up their privilege. Well, people do not want to like give up their privilege. If they did, then this history would not be cyclical. It's the same cycles continuously, because every time there is revolution, every time there's a need for, you know, a new future, a need for reinventing the way that we are.
There hasn't been a real revolution. There hasn't been a real like what we're calling revolution in Euro-Western society is bullcrap. It's not revolution. It's just like, we want to redo the exact same thing with a slightly different format, like, or a different person at the helm. Like, they don't actually get rid of any aspect of this society. They haven't, you know, changed anything huge or fundamental. And one of the biggest problems of activism is that we are continually have pushed down our throat European revolutions as like how we should change things. Change what? What the fuck has any European revolution ever actually changed? It hasn't even confronted anything real. It's never confronted any of the bones of of capitalist colonial society. And no, communism does not confront the bones of capitalism. It is seen as a progression.
And it also ignores so
I totally
much.
lost my sound on you. Hang on.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I need those earphones. This is going to be a thing. Sorry. I need those earphones. I'm sorry. Mine died. Yeah. I need you to turn those down. I need you to be really good. I need you to turn. Sorry.
No problem. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh shit, I was saying. The idea we were talking about earlier. All right, the idea of communism, even as it heralded as the best, even in like, I think if we're even going to talk about
the best form of white supremacy,
everything has to come back again to indigenous and Black roots. Like, communism really only works when those two people are leading, or at least when
I don't think it does, because we can look at many decolonized places where that's not working. And the interesting thing is, in 1955, in the Bandung Conference, many nations from Africa and Asia gathered together as they're all like fighting to decolonize. And they all said, we cannot accept capitalism or communism because they are essentially the same thing and they are tied to the same system. And they were all forced to. And we still see all those same problems of capitalism and hierarchy, privilege, white supremacy in those places because they were forced into those systems. The only difference is we're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah, and even in communism, there is a hierarchy. You know, the bourgeoisie,
and I mean, there's racism in communist countries for a really good reason, and that's because Marx and Engels were racist. You can't like make a non-racist system based on the ideas of racists. You can't.
Also, the fact that they completely ignore it. They say, oh, it's all just class, which is such a gross misunderstanding. It is not just class. Class definitely ties into, there's lots of different dynamics, which is why I love the idea of, I forgot what her name is, Crenshaw, who came up with the idea of intersectionality. That's why that was so pivotal. I mean, now it's taken out of context, but it was so pivotal in that time because it's like it's complex. It's not as simple as race. It's not as simple as gender. Once you just pick one or the other, you completely disregard like 90% of the actual fight. It's just one part of the whole. You know, you have to dismantle it all before you can,
it was a whole system. Yeah, it was a whole system. And those systems are still upheld in communism. And communism runs off the same 7 things capitalism does that, that gets laid out in 7 cheap things by Raj and Patel. They don't say communism runs off these same 7 things, but it does. It runs on cheap labor, cheap money, cheap land, cheap care, cheap lives, and cheap food.
Also, like, how does it, I always constantly think about like the transition. How do you transition from a very racist world, very racist, anti-indigenous world to this concept of communism without entering a colorblind, kind of society again?
Yeah. Well, you can't. Like, Marx and Engels made comments about, world indigenous people. They made comments about it in stating that, self-determination wasn't meant for small relics of people. And we have seen that repeatedly in communism, just like we see it in capitalism. And Marx said colonialism is best for the backwards people of Africa, Asia, and elsewhere. So there should be no surprise ever that that system has no room for us. Its roots are based on those concepts that, we weren't ever really part of their working class.
It's true.
I mean, even the working class never included the peasant, but, Marx and Engels like to glaze over that. Communists have liked to glaze over it. That it never was meant to be inclusive. There was always people below the working class, you know, people who didn't get unionized. And while they, you know, went and tried to gain their support in the 1800s, like it didn't actually benefit any of the marginalized people they tried to pull in to support that in those time periods. It didn't change any of those realities. It really only benefited the, you know, working class, the unionized class.
Yeah, and the fact that it feels like we do have to pick between a rock and a hard place again, because communism is starting to pick up again. It has been for a while, and like that's like the alternative that we should be thinking of. But I think, especially in this, you know, as we enter the age of Aquarius, it's about completely reinventing. First of all, toppling, you know, in Capricorn,
toppling these European systems based on racism,
topple them, and then we create something completely new. You know, we have, like, and that's why I say, like, burn it all, like, get rid of it all. None of it's like, it's to the point where now there's nothing nothing we can salvage. There's not much we can salvage, and we shouldn't have to, because it's always gonna be a little bit, like a little inkling of those ideas.
And we should question when, you know, various leftist political groups want marginalized peoples to join their idea of revolution and a solution to the racism we're fighting. Why do we have to come join their political ideas for that? Why aren't they coming and joining our political ideas for that? Like, there's plenty of Indigenous folks out there, like myself, who consider themselves Indigenous, and be like, we had systems of governance that were not hierarchical, that were pre-anarchistic, you know, that don't look like your forms of governance. There's history of it being wiped out in the 17 and 1800s, and how you did it. It's all written there. Like, you know, we have understandings that they could come to our side on, instead of saying, like, your solution is to come join our political understanding.
And like, even because I like, my field that I've been trying to get into, but is psychology, and even in the like therapy and psychological world, it's like, when, like, there's lots of books being published now, especially in Canada, that come from Indigenous people who are kind of teaching the old ways of, you know, their ways of, I shouldn't say old ways, their ways of healing, and their ways of kind of holistically approaching, you know, healing and taking care of each other and community and all that stuff, and how it's so vital. And like, I read the text, and it's just like, it feels like how do I say it? It's almost like perfect. It's like, you can just see how this is it. This is right. This is exactly the way it should be. It just feels good. And I know for like all these, you know, left brain people who are logical, it's hard to tell them, like, this is like, it just feels intuitively right. All these other ways do not. It's like, you have to compartmentalize yourself, you have to squish yourself, you have to bend, but this way is right, it's correct. And I don't have the, you know, of course you can bring the studies later, because the studies also say the same thing, that these are the ways it should be, these are the ways things should be, this is the way things have run, and this is the way this land recognizes it too. Like, I remember I was talking to whatever the name, Raven from here, and I remember when I came here, I told them, I don't feel like this land recognizes that I'm from here. Like, this land doesn't recognize me as part of its cycle, and it's because of the way that you know, industrialization, capitalism has completely destroyed the connection that the earth has with us, and now it doesn't even recognize us as part of it. We are outliers. We're a cancer, as opposed to part of the cycle. Or part of the system, but when we go back to those teachings of, like, this land has a particular history, this, you know, Turtle Island has a very particular way of being that's been in existence for so long. You respect the land, you respect the way things have been on this land, you respect the people on this land, and you work with this system, trying to create a whole new system and dump it. And it's like poisoning the true, you know, the connection that this land has with us and the land, you know. So it's just,
your people were separated in so many ways, from the ability to go and be in nature and to touch the earth without it being like, you know, under chains. Like, you can only touch the earth for the benefit of other people. And we see it replicated in so many ways, from like, ability and access to homes in rural communities, or the way people of color are received when you show up on a campground. It's like, what are you doing here? And these things replicate it, and it gets replicated in small ways, like, children screaming on a playground is fine, but the sound of the basketball on the basketball court is not. And so we see it replicated over and over, this access to the outdoors and to the earth.
Yeah. There's so much. Yeah. And it's just thinking even of the people who are, even thinking of like, non-white people, like, the spell is still needs to be like destroyed. Some, like, lots of our people a lot of our people are still stuck in that, oh, this is the only way, there's no other way we can be. They're still stuck in that spell. And until we as a collective, because there's way more of us than there are of them.
There is. We make up 80% of the world.
Exactly. Our numbers are so much greater. If we all just kind of stepped away from that, and kind of destroyed the spell as a collective, there'd be no choice. We wouldn't have to sit there and beg white people to talk to their own people. It's almost pitiful that we have to do that. That's the only way we can really have, or how right now we can have any type of change. We have to kind of convince white people that, oh no, you're going to destroy yourself, and in destroying yourself, you're going to destroy us. So let's work together. And it's like you have to kind of beg them and plead them to see the truth, and you can't. People have to kind of walk into it themselves. But it's just, I'd love to say that we just kind of have to ignore white people, like, forget about them, like, let them get to the let them come to the truth when they come to the truth, but we have to work on our own selves, our own communities. Of course, I feel
similarly about things in that, like, they're willing to listen to white people and not us, but I'm done with that, because white people aren't saying the things we would say. They aren't risking their privilege to say the things that we would say. They say it more palatable. They whitewash it. It gets watered down. If a white person isn't willing to listen to you, then they're only listening to other white people because it's being whitewashed for them. So they weren't actually going to listen to, like, our actual ideas and what actually has to change anyway. If they can't listen to us, they aren't ready to change. And it's time to talk to those who are ready to listen to change.
And they'll come to,
they will.
They'll come. They'll flock.
And and they're the ones who are going to be invested in that change. That the person who wants to, like, help, as long as it's, clean and pure and good, and none of their privilege is going to be risked in that fight or in joining you, like, they weren't going to do anything. The minute they say, well, you have to understand, I have a job, a family, a house, they weren't going to change anything. Because they're saying, I want to help, but I never want to let go of this. I never want to let go of privilege.
Which is necessary. Even, and there's a movement that's been going on where people are challenging this idea that we deserve luxury, and in Black circles, it's about, like, how we as Black people, just as it's almost like just as we're reaching the finish line in terms of capitalism, just as more people are starting to get towards capitalism, it's like it's being taken away, in that, like, we will never be, like, I think as a collective, we will have to understand that we'll never be able to reach that goal. It is not meant for us. As soon as we get here, now everybody, instead of, sorry, let me rephrase that. As soon as we're now starting to become successful in this idea of capitalism, and I say successful loosely, they now switch it up, and now we're all trying to be rural and we're all trying to be sustainable, and like it's like that finish line is always going to completely flip-flop. It's never going, because it's not meant for us. We're never ever supposed to reach the goal.
We see it in Indigenous communities too. We do. And they want us to strive for privilege. They don't want us to achieve privilege. They want us to strive for privilege. Yeah.
And as soon as we get there, as soon as we're getting close, or too much of us are getting a little too much ahead, they just take it
But
away.
also, if we say that to like end, white supremacy, they have to give up privilege. That this is the issue. This is what we need to give up. This is what we need to give up. So if we're striving for it, we're not going to succeed in that fight either.
Yeah, we're always going to be doomed no matter what.
And we've seen it, like when we began this conversation and talked about how like we put healers and spiritual leaders on pedestals, and they sometimes take up and keep up the pedestal that they're on. Like we see what that does to our people when privilege seeps in.
We don't have true leadership. Yeah, we don't have spiritual. We just lose everything. Again, it's this idea of like only one, and it goes back to the church again. The priest, this person is the only person who can talk with the divine. That's it. It's again robs all of us of our power. Robs all of us of our communal communal connection, which is how we should be together as a community doing our spiritual practice. My spiritual practice is can help yours can help mine. Like it's all about collective work, collective spiritual work, collective work in general. And I'm tired. I'm so tired of this idea of putting people on pedestal. And then what always happens when you put people on pedestal, that's where jealousy and resentment comes as well. Like it just kind of goes hand in hand. You cannot put people on pedestal. You cannot do that type of white wave of heralding people as the greatest of whatever. It just leads to more trouble. And again, people have to give it up too. Pass the mic is what I used to always say. Pass the mic. You cannot hog the mic. Pass the mic, because that's the only way we're going to get anything done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we're passing the mic, we have so many voices. We have 80% of the world's voices. We don't have time to get that mic to all of us if we're asking like Becky and Karen to speak for us first.
I know. It's not, yeah. God.
Yeah.
And
if you want to give, Black, brown, Indigenous, people of color voice, bring your people to us. Don't speak for us. Bring your people to us.
Come in our communities, which they'll never do, or the only way they do is through gentrification. That's the only way they'll come into our communities, and to take from it, and to take the land and take the areas. It's but again, at the end of the day, their way is doomed, and unless they and we're going to do this work. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. Like we don't really have a choice. We don't have a choice. We are going to die, or we're going to thrive in our own communities, in our own, this new, imagining of this, of a better world. We have to do it, and we're going to do it on our own, in our own places, in our own spaces, away from them. And we're soon what's going to happen, like you said, they're going to take their ships to wherever and go be out in space and live in a world that's completely not fun and not great, and then they're going to come back and realize that what we were doing was exactly what we should have been doing. Like I would not be surprised if 100, 200 years in the future, however long it is, they leave, and they leave the people who can't afford it, who are usually racialized people, and then the earth becomes renewed because of that, and then we realize that was a cancer all along. Like
privilege was a cancer all along.
Yeah, it was cancer all along. Yeah.
Thank you very much for having this talk with me.
No, thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
Me as well. It's been a while. I have not been able to talk to, COVID is really, really taken it like a hit, made me take a hit when it comes to spiritual talks and just talking about the world in general. Like, where are we going? What do we do? How do we change it? How do we change ourselves? All that stuff. So Thank you so much for having this series has been very amazing and great to see and to hear.
Thank you. And yeah, it will be nice when it's over. I plan on traveling out to Nova Scotia again when it is over. And
that would be so great.
It would be nice. And I miss being able to move around and see people and listen to different people.
Mm-hmm.
I miss it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but soon, hopefully
soon. I'm twice vaccinated.
Oh,
got both my vaccinations.
Yay! I'm still waiting until the 10th because our place here is terrible. My age group is like now just opening up, so you've been very slow. But
I was able to get mine early and both shots back to back because folks in the US, Canada has a shortage of vaccines, so people are not getting the second vaccine for like 4 or 5 months. But so I was able to get both shots being Indigenous. But my 7-year-old likes to remind me he hasn't been able to get vaccinated yet. And so, yeah.
But, hopefully things will happen soon. And then we can get back to, again, organizing and really, really trying to spearhead I will say a true revolution that is backed by, true, that comes from a better place,
land-based.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. All right. Well,
see you later.
So again. Bye. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too. See you.
Thank you. Bye.